Chapter 12, Part 2 of The Bashful Preacher. After the Tidneys' baptizing, Ma Tidney invited him to light and tie up later at the Tidney cabin, if he found no better place to sup and sleep. Jay could think of no better place. He didn't go straight to the Tidney house, for there were more brands to splurge in the Quenching Creek. But when those labours were over, he rode for that small grey dwelling, following the directions given him. He found the place behind its fence, with the sweet peas peeking. He turned his horse into the pasture beside the tumble-down barn and returned to the front of the house, where a row of small youngsters perched at the edge of the porch. They skedaddled as he approached. His hand on their chests and backs had been stern, and the water cold. He stepped to the doorway, which was open. She was seated at a quilting frame that was hinged to the rough wall. Her back and shoulder were toward him. Her dress was fresh and dry. She didn't see him. But of course she did see him. She turned a seam of blue stuff. She said then, even-voiced, "Well, won't you come in?" He entered. His shoes were squishy. She said, "Back up to the fire and dry out, Mr. Preacher, or would you rather borrow Pa's pants?" He did not have a rather for her Pa's pants. Though he was 6 foot, Pa Tidney's pants would swamp him. So he stood on the hearth with the tails to his preaching coat spread and heisted while she went on stitching. Small noises sent his glance upward. 6 children's faces were around the stair-hole to the sleeping loft. Cried Laurel Tidney, "You young ones scuttle right down." The 6, squealing with glee, shot down the ladder stair and out the back. A claw grabbed them. "Git!" charged a voice, and the shed door slammed. Whoever had dealt with the children then came in. "This is Aunt Sabrina Vasey," mentioned the girl. "Auntie's visiting us." Jay Gatlin felt himself being eyed from unruly hair and beardless chin straight down to the mountain boots. Aunt Sabrina stated forthrightly, "Laurel's a real pert girl, young man. Healthy, pleasant-tempered, plenty of boys after her. She has 9 quilts already." "Auntie!" Laurel's cheeks flamed. "Well, might as well trot out the facts. Though when I was your age, Laurel Tidney, I had 15 quilts and my man all picked out and landed, too." "Auntie, stop!" To the guest she said, "Sit down if you've dried." Laurel's ma came in. Like her sister Sabrina, she was bird-like, but not so plump. She was inclined to be tart with the visitor. "Too bad you preachers let Ep's brother get away, young man. Now I'll have to put up with his sinful ways till another big stir." Laurel took the dishes down from the cupboard. Jay, though careful not to stare, sensed the grace of her movements. With each reaching up and taking down, he seemed to hear Aunt Sabrina's, "Laurel's healthy, pleasant-tempered." He added to himself, "In another year, she'll be about 16. In another year." Pa Tidney, rangy and freckled, thrust his head in. "Howdy, Reverend. Anybody want to help me do Clinch's chores? That brother of mine is the shuck-lightenest man." Jay Gatlin jumped up and went out with Ep. He came in after 20 minutes, clasping firewood. When both men were washed, "We won't wait for Uncle Clinch," said Ma Tidney. "Draw up all that's a mind to." Jay dropped to a stool at the foot of the table. When he finished grace, Clinch Tidney sidled in. The sinner looked a bit triumphant. There was a strong whiff of the old dew of corn about him. He took his seat, while Ma, Laurel, and Sabrina brought in bowls of gravelled taters and leather breeches and boiled dough with apples. A 5-year-old prowled behind Jay. "Yadkin, light and perch somewheres," ordered Ma. Yelped the moppet at Jay. "The son of an egg-suck hound dog has my place." Pa rose, wiped his mouth, and caught up his offspring as one would lift a fiddle. Yells from behind the lean-to door followed. The 2 returned, and Yadkin climbed to the bench beside his brothers. Laurel came and went. Her back was trim, her brown hair gathered with a ribbon, and with a field flower poked into it. A string went around her neck and dived beneath her dress front. Jay's mother, all her days, had kept a carved peach stone on a neck string. Its fitted halves had clapped some dried petals. A love potion, she'd called it. and had sure enough done for his father. What did Laurel have on that string? These were idle thoughts, and Jay thrust them from him. He put his mind to the poke salad, cornbread, sorghum sweetening, and the cucumber pickles. Supper done, Pa, Uncle Clinch, and Jay settled by the fire. Jay's horse was snug in the barn. Later, the women joined the group. Jay and Laurel found their stools side by side. Laurel plaited a horsehair belt. Ma and Sabrina took up work baskets. The 6 young ones finished a game outside and wriggled into the circle. Pa Tidney, puffing his pipe, stabbed about for something to discuss. Turkey shooting, the blast of insects which had chewed on the apple leaves, Bide Beckett's big-headed calf, Link Yawkey's call on Shiloh Vasey. I hear she flang a coffee pot at him. Shiloh had better not be so particular, stated Aunt Sabrina. All Link craved was to give her back her Sunday stockings. She laid them to soak under a rock, and they took off downstream and catched in his mill wheel. She's grown mighty tetchious. 30 years a virgin, summed up Aunt Sabrina. Hits a strain. The talk was veering around to the flesh, and Jay, the young minister, didn't feel like chiding his elders. He sought another topic. His eyes passed over the chimney breast and its ornaments. Candlestick, rifle gun, little stuffed squirrel that had maybe been a pet, and halted on a yard-long wooden tube. The tube was fixed at each end with a pewter ear. Aunt Sabrina followed his gaze. That's a courting tube. Pass it down. Pa handed down the curious object. Our forefolk brought it in from Pennsylvania, said Aunt Sabrina. 5 generations use this old helper. It's fined around a hearth when young folks are settin' crowded. Gives young people a chance to spark, and nobody the wiser. She passed it over to the visitor. He sensed Laurel go sort of stiff. Blushing, he took the ancient implement. He held it cautiously as if it were a gun barrel still hot from the words once fired through it. Aunt Sabrina, looking sleek and sly, went back to her darning. Jay, dreadfully embarrassed, lifted up one end to his lips. The other end wandered everywhere except toward Laurel. It scraped the nose of little Yadkin. That tadpole snatched his end of the tube and whooped into it. You fine-haired egg-suck hound dog! Ma and Pa, Aunt Sabrina, and Uncle Clinch all took a belt at him. He danced out of range, yelling, It was worth it! Get to bed, all youngsters, rumbled Pa. There was a dragging departure. Yadkin's pert mug showed at the ceiling hold. You dast talk sparking to her, you fine-haired! Laurel laid down her horsehair plaiting and climbed the steep stair. Except for her low voice telling a story, silence reigned. She came down, keeping her face turned away. Jay was glad to the core when she was back on her stool. Pa remarked, yawning, Saturday night, reckon I'll take my bath. In here, Effie, where it's warm. Ma put aside the work basket and went out. She returned, shoving a wooden tub with her foot. From the pot over the dog irons, she dumped a steamy splash. She went out to the well and came back with a bucket of cold water. Soap's in the gourd. Pa dropped his boots behind the backs of the fireside sitters. Ma blew out the lamp. There was splashing and blowing. You don't have to shosh the whole house, scolded Ma. More puffs, sounds of toweling, a creak of a heavy form rolled into bed. A whoosh of comfort. A creak of upsitting, and Pa exclaimed, You might set that rifle gun by me. Clinch handed the weapon to him, remarking that it was about time to make his own denture in the hay. Pa snecked the gun and clumped it down. Uncle Tinch spoke his good night and went out to the barn. Aunt Sabrina went to the shed off the living room and returned in a wrapper. There was a scrunch of goose feathers as she settled into the other bed. Ma's own garment swished off in the dark. She observed, Laurel, you and the Reverend will have to get along without us. He's to follow Clinch when he's minded to. A scrunch of feathers alongside Pa, and the house went still.